Could Mali's capital actually fall to an affiliate of Al-Qaeda? A string of coups and the pushing out of former colonial power France in favor of Russian support haven't stopped insurgents from making gains throughout the Sahel's so-called coup belt that stretches from Burkina Faso to Niger. We'll ask about the blockade on Bamako that's made it perilous for fuel delivery trucks to reach the capital of this landlocked West African state, and what it would take to repel the JNIM, as it's called. Mali's had its back to the wall before. In 2013, when insurgents first tried to take the capital, the French chased them away. But that hero's welcome in the northern city of Timbuktu for then-President François Hollande, now a distant memory. How do Malians take back their own country? What's the alternative to what the jihadists are offering? And what's the spillover effect of potential failed states at the heart of the Sahel for the region and also for here in Europe? Today in the France 24 debate, could Bamako fall? With us, JNIM researcher at the Foundation for Strategic Research think tank. Welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Pierre-Élie de Rohan-Chabot, West Africa editor for the newsletter Africa Intelligence. Good to see you. We'll be joined later from Copenhagen by Signe Marie Kold-Ravnuk, senior researcher at the Danish Institute for International Studies, and from Cortland, New York, Mali-born anthropologist and linguist Kassim Kone, professor at the Cortland campus of the State University of New York. You can always listen, that's right, listen to the show wherever podcasts are streamed. Let's begin with the worldwide shock over the execution of a TikTok influencer in the north of Mali. Mariam Cissé, abducted by armed men at market in the town of Echelle last Friday, and then executed in Independence Square in nearby Tonka. No claim of responsibility so far. Cissé, not a member of the military, but sometimes she did post images of herself in fatigues showing support for Mali's army to her more than 140,000 followers.
This occasion is both fitting and sorrowful for us, as we take a moment to remember Miss Mariam Cissé, who was cowardly murdered by terrorist groups, simply because she expressed her support for her country and its army. May Allah welcome her into paradise, and may Allah also grant paradise to all victims of insecurity and terrorism.
JNIM Cissé, this part of a broader strategy?
Yes. What's interesting with JNIM is that they've always tried not to indiscriminately target civilians, especially Muslim civilians. But here, the difference is that they targeted very publicly and executed, actually, very publicly, a young woman and civilian, which was not really part of the motto. But at the same time, they've always abducted and executed people, civilians that they deem collaborating with the army and collaborating with the government. So here the problem was that this young woman was posting videos of Malian armed forces. So I think it's a strong message sent to populations as well, saying that you're either with us, and in that case, we're not going to target you, and we'll install an Islamic governance for everyone, or you're against us, and in that case, you will be executed.
We are pleased to be able to welcome by telephone, gremlins in the system when it comes to video links right now, from Cortland, New York, Kassim Kone, professor at SUNY Cortland. Kassim, this took place some 150 kilometers outside of Timbuktu. Is it going to work, this intimidation of citizens there?
Let me turn off. I honestly do not believe that this intimidation is going to work. It's just a matter of time. You know, time is on the side of Malians, and especially including Malian civilians. Time is on their side. Sooner or later, JNIM or any Islamic State, they're all going to have to leave the country. one way or another.
They're not winning hearts and minds, is what you're saying.
I'm sorry?
Not winning over the population.
No, they are not at all. The population is under pressure, and they're not winning over the population. In fact, I have noticed, that many Malians now are really starting to lose their faith in Islam. So there is, a serious group of people, who are just combating Islam as a faith right now, in Mali. It's very difficult to believe, given that the country is more than 95% Muslim, as they claim.
Pierre-Elie Durand-Chabot, are you seeing a backlash? The jihadists have been there for a long time, and they seem to be on the front foot, Pierre-Elie. We've seen more and more of these attacks, entire areas that are virtual no-go zones where you need an army convoy to get in and out. But do you agree with what you just heard from Kassim Kone, that it's not working?
Well, I mean, obviously it's quite hard to measure population support for JNIM. But what's also pretty clear is that it is a movement that cares about it. And it cares about it since, it's even before its creation, so to speak. If you think about it, the ancestor of JNIM, which is Al-Qaeda in the Islamic Maghreb, once ruled Tombouctou. And this was at the beginning of the 2010s. And before the French intervened militarily, they ruled the city. And what happened is that they exerted very strong rule, very harsh rule, implemented some Sharia tough punishments. And at some point, this triggered a sort of, backlash from the higher ranks of the movement and of Al-Qaeda itself, that actually wrote to the local commanders and said, you need to go slower in implementing this. You need to be less tough, because otherwise we'll be losing popular support. So I think JNIM over the years has been quite good at, manipulating the carrot and the stick, if that makes sense. They sometimes are able to, exert some terror tactics. And I think it was very well said by Jenabu, sending strong messages to the population. You are either with us or against us. On the other hand, it is also really aware that if it will be perceived as too severe, too tough, then this will compromise its chances of ruling the country.
And it's a question, of course, that has a spillover effect. Jihadist attacks felt across national borders, refugees taking shelter in frontline states like Ivory Coast and Mauritania, where earlier this week, correspondent Caitlin Kelly, this is a map showing, according to AFP, places where there have been jihadist attacks in those three Sahelian countries. Earlier this week, correspondent Caitlin Kelly filed this report from the Mauritanian side of the border with Mali.
Just a few kilometres from here lies extremist-held territory, where fighting between the Malian army, its Russian allies and armed groups has intensified in recent weeks. And now here on the Malian border with Mauritania, hundreds of refugees are fleeing the violence. In late September, the Al-Qaeda-linked group JNIM announced it was cutting off fuel supplies to Mali, setting up checkpoints on main roads to stop fuel from reaching the cities and effectively crippling the country's economy. Around 20 kilometres from this point on the border, in villages like Lere, family describe living under blockade, with food and supplies cut off by the group. Refugees I've spoken to say JNIM ordered entire villages to leave, giving residents just a couple of days to leave or face life under their rule, or even death. Others told me they fled attacks from the Malian army and its Russian allies, Africa Corps, reporting drone strikes and ground attacks less than 30 kilometres from here. Some described their whole villages burnt and family members killed before their eyes.
On one side of us were the jihadists, and on the other, Wagner. In the past we could hide, but now it's not possible. The girl sat next to me. Her father was taken and we've had no news since.
We hate Bagno for coming into our country, for slaughtering us on our own land without having done anything to deserve it.
In the past 2 weeks alone, more than 1,600 people have arrived here at this border point in Mauritania as the situation next door worsens, joining over 300,000 refugees already displaced into this region.
We are all scared. Our souls are not at peace because we are dying every day. We saw we were in danger of dying, so we decided to leave.
We left everything we owned behind, and we can't go back to recover any of it.
Many believe this is Mali's most critical moment since 2012, as fighting across the country between the army, its Russian allies and insurgents has already displaced millions. As one refugee described it to me, Mali has become a no-go zone.
All right, so we do have a video link with Copenhagen. We can say hello to Signe Marie Ravnikilde, senior researcher at the Danish Institute for International Studies. You heard Caitlin Kelly, a correspondent there, describing the rock and a hard place in between which civilians are. Is this the most dire moment since just before January 2013 when the French intervened for Mali?
Well, I would say there has been quite a few dire moments in the security crisis evolving in the Sahel, but this is definitely an indication of an escalation. The blockade marks an intensified campaign by the jihadists to control key supply lines in and out of the capital. Well, I don't necessarily think, and I think this is what observers is discussing, whether JNIM actually wants to aim for, and if they did have the capacity to control the city is a different question. I think what it also shows very much is their way of governing in the Sahel. It's more important to control what goes in and out of the territory than actually controlling the territory itself. So I think we have to remember that these are extremely pragmatic and highly adaptable groups that have a very long-term aim. So right now what we're seeing is that they're putting economic pressure on the government in order to gain leverage.
Yeah, so it begs the question, what is JNIM? Who runs it? Where are they from?
Well, JNIM is a merger of 4 Al-Qaeda-related groups, and they announced themselves in 2017 under the leadership of Yak Agali, a notable former Tuareg fighter who has then changed to swore allegiance to Al-Qaeda. And their tactic has actually been quite localized, first moving into rural areas, the Liptako-Gourmet, extremely central border regions on the border zones with Mali, Niger and Burkina Faso. And from there on, also relying on local katibas and very highly decentralized structures, they have been able to spread both into Niger and Burkina Faso, who's also facing quite important insurgencies, but also, as we have seen since 2022, attacking the coastal states. And recently also we have seen attacks on the borders with Mauritania and Senegal. So this kind of shows that we are not in a situation of Afghanistan that this is often compared to, where you have from 60 to 100,000 security forces nationwide. It's much less fighters, but we do see a quite adaptable and strategic way of controlling supply routes and being highly mobile. And that's also why the fuel is so central to this strategy, because this is the lifeline. And Mali is also undergoing a crisis of energy. So many observers also say that the government's ability to sustain in power will also depend on their ability to actually solve this crisis. And we have seen some attempt to actually do that.
All right. I want to get back to this issue of fuel and energy, which is so key. But first, Jenna Boussissé, your reaction to what you just heard there from Signe Marie, that JNIM's is playing the long game, and the long game isn't necessarily controlling power in the capital.
Yes, JNIM has always been known for its capacity of adaptation, and they've always played the long game. Like Pierre-Élie mentioned, even under Al-Qaeda in the Islamic Maghreb, they had this vision of wanting to develop local alliances and to build a long-term presence, because they learned from 2012 and from Timbuktu. We even found in letters from 2012 where the emir was saying that we need to win the hearts and minds, and we need...
So what's the ultimate goal? What's the aim?
The ultimate goal would be governance and insurrection, but not necessarily a caliphate like ISIS did in 2014. It's more about about insurrection, about building influence within populations, because they also know that they don't have the military capacity to seize the city. They don't have the political power for now to control the city. JNIM, it's mainly rural areas. They control pockets of rural areas, but they don't control cities. So that's also why they're asphyxiating the economy and putting so much pressure on the government. They know they cannot just enter the city and they will have huge popular support. They need to asphyxiate the economy to keep this, well, like we said, leopard influence, and with all these pockets of influence and then in the long term building these Islamic governance. But the time is on their side. Again, I know that it was said that it was also on the side on the population, but what is dangerous with them is that they have all the time in the world, whereas the governments in power have very short-term visions, and that's also why they've been relying mainly on military approaches, even though only development approach and governance approach would actually kill JNIM.
Yeah, because, and I'll put it to you, Kassim Kone, the heavy hand that we've seen on the part of the junta and their Russian partners, that's also enraged the population. You heard a clip of one of those refugees in that report earlier. Do citizens put both sides in the same bag? Do they see them as equally evil?
No, I would not say so. I actually was in Mali. I left Mali on October 13th. That was during the time when, gas shortage has already started. Actually, I was worried about how to get gas to get to the airport. But one thing that the outside world does not understand is that Malians are strongly determined, to go through these hardships, and they are behind the military. That is something that is difficult to understand from Western perspective. And I still think, unlike what Jeanne Boussissé said, that time is on the side of Malians. If they try to asphyxiate the economy, they are also part of this economy, and they are just a small part of this economy. So I think that within some time, I don't know exactly how long, but people are actually going to turn against the members of the JNIM. The fact that they are still operational is that they still have support, but they are also as violent as the Russian assistance that Malians are having. So people who happen to have been displaced, have gone through a lot of hardships. So and they are also exposed to the type of information that is different from the information that is presently found, among Malians who are not that much affected by this tragedy, as we should call it.
And that brings us back. That brings us back because you mentioned there that issue of that fuel blockade. It began in September. Convoys from Senegal and Ivory Coast were targeted. In Bamako, there were long lines. There was a video release at the end of October where the jihadists announced all roads around Bamako were considered war zones and insisted on the separation of men and women on public transport. Now, this week, something of a respite. On Monday, fuel trucks getting into the capital, gas stations reopening, and as a consequence, schools also reopening in the capital, Bamako.
Because some of the teachers live far away, they cannot come to teach children without motorcycles. If there is no fuel, it's not easy. That's why they weren't coming. But since it has resumed today, we hope it will continue.
So Pierre-Élie Doron-Chabot, this blockade of Bamako, and now this, like, the fuel's allowed in. What's going on there?
Well, yeah, no, it's right to point that out. I think some sources suggested that approximately a third of the previous levels of fuel supplies was now getting through the capital, which is significantly more that used to be the case when the blockade started a bit less than a month ago. So there seems indeed to be a slight improvement. It seems that the Malian junta is sort of, finding some sort of way to deal with the crisis. One of them consists in securing the convoys. There's been strong pressure exerted from the government to convince private operators to wait at the border, whether it be in Senegal or Ivory Coast, to wait for the Malian army to send detachments to be able to accompany these oil or fuel shipments to the capital. So this seems to be working to some point because, the fact that there are, one must not forget that it's also a show put on by the regime, to reassure partners. We've seen in the couple of previous weeks all the major powers calling their citizens to leave Mali,
including France and the United States.
Exactly. So there's clearly a willingness also to sort of reassure these people and to show that things are getting back to normal in Bamako. Actually, as we speak, there is this Turkish arms fair that's taking place. There were a lot of rumors about it that being cancelled, and now you could see all these Malian officials sort of showcasing it and with a certain pride, saying life is carrying on in Bamako despite everything that's being said about the city's security.
I want to get back to that arms fair because I know that JNIM will have things to say about it. But first, Signe Marie Ravnikilde, why is the fuel now getting back into Bamako?
I think that was very well explained before, that there's both a military launch to secure convoys, and also Niger has also supplied some fuels to the city, also a sign of some solidarity between the area's countries. But and of course the government is being quite vocal and showing that it is able to supply this, because it's extremely important and because it touches everyone in the city. And I would also like to just say a remark on this thing that Kone said, that it's true that there's a very big difference between the support that these groups have in some of the rural areas where the state's presence has historically been more contested, both in northern and central Mali, which is also not as highly densely populated as these southern areas. So what we're seeing is also an expansion southwards of this insurgency, attacking some of the more economic important regions in Mali, like K, for instance. So some of these industrial zones where alternative partners to Western partners are operating, like the Chinese and cases like that, they are targeting that, which is also showing the multi-scalar of this insurgency. But what we're seeing now with the government, the military government trying to solve it is it's quite important, and it will also be, I think, very difficult for JNIM to do the same kind of pressure that they do in more poor and rural areas.
Yeah, the
compared to
insurgents.
Bamako.
The insurgents certainly have the attention of European capitals ahead of Thursday's 10th anniversary of the November 2015 Paris attacks that were orchestrated by radicals that were at the time based in their own caliphate in Syria. The head of French foreign intelligence was asked where today's potential threats lie. Nicolas Lerner telling public radio station France Inter that Africa is now, quote, the epicenter of terrorism globally, and it directly threatens security in Europe.
The intelligence we have shows that JNIM is not necessarily capable of, nor willing to control the country, to control Mali, as it is also aware of its limitations. On the other hand, everything suggests that JNIM wants the junta to fall and a government to be created that is in favor of imposing a caliphate on part or all of the Malian territory. Obviously, what we are seeing today is a form of permissiveness in the movement of people between Burkina Faso, Niger and Mali. And since France's withdrawal, we also have a security model largely overseen by the Russians that is now failing.
Jenab Cissé, yeah, we haven't seen the Russians throughout this whole blockade, have we?
Yeah, and we haven't seen them much also after the fall of Assad in Syria. I think it says a lot. The Russians have also been very opportunistic. The whole presence was about supporting the regime and to have this deal for giving their security services in return for access to strategic resources. Gold, but also even access to the power. So it's always been very opportunistic for them, and I think because of that, they will not take the risk of engaging in a very long and protracted war if there had to be a civilian war. So I don't think that the regime can rely on the Russians if Bamako were to fall. I think that it's likely that the Russians would leave, actually, but it's totally in line with their strategy on the continent. It's always been about instrumentalizing chaos, relying on authoritarian regimes to get strategigic access, but not necessarily like their narrative tends to point. It's never been about supporting friendly regimes and building peace or whatever.
When you were back in Bamako, Kassim Kone, what did people think about the Russian involvement and what the Russians should or should not be doing?
Okay. One thing that most people forget is that Mali had a very long relationship with the Soviet Union, and both the Soviet Union and Russia.
We seem to have lost the connection there with Kassim Kone. We'll try to reconnect as quickly as possible. Apologies for that. Yeah, plenty of reactions on the hashtag F24debate. Lee on X, formerly Twitter, saying a jihadist takeover of Mali is not a question of if, but when. While Diarra states that the biggest terrorist threat in Africa is France. A sentiment echoed, by the way, Tuesday by Mali's Prime Minister, General Abdoulaye Maïga.
As an author once said, to misname things is to add to the world's misfortune. We will not add to that misfortune. We will say it clearly. Today, those on the side of the terrorist groups operating in our region are the French junta and the Algerian junta.
Pierre-Henri Durand-Chabot, the French junta.
Yes. Well, you know, it's there again. It's not something really new. I mean, this the current Malian regime has taken this habit of blaming the former colonial power, for the deterioration of the security situation in Mali, and for a couple of years ago, we remember our previous Malian Prime Minister Choguel Maïga, accusing the French of helping the jihadist cause. So this is not something really new.
And why put Algeria? Just to remind our viewers, why is Algeria also in the crosshairs of the junta?
Well, that's actually really interesting because the rupture between Bamako and Alger is much less recent. And we've seen
much more recent.
Much more recent. Sorry. Thanks. We've seen it, in very vivid, in a very vivid way on the margins of the UN General Assembly in September, where you had the Malian Prime Minister and the Algerian Foreign Minister that engage in a very lively sort of verbal food. And this is due to several reasons. The Algerians are blaming the Malians for not, ensuring their territory security. They're also blaming the Malian junta, on its side, is blaming the Algerian government for hosting a number of personalities which it considers, threatening or sometimes supportive of the jihadist cause. These notably include Imam Dicko, who is a very well-known and popular preacher, very well-known to the Malian population. And he left, I think it was last April, for Algiers because he thought he was threatened by the Malian authorities, and he found refuge in Algiers.
But Imam Dicko is not a jihadist.
No, of course he's not. But the Malian junta is suspecting him of having some links, or at least it was suspecting some of his sympathizers of having links with the jihadist cause. And you can go beyond Dicko. I mean, there are some Tuareg rebels that are fighting the Malian government that used to be, in war with JNIM, but now that are working in a sort of informal alliance with JNIM. And this is it's called the FLA, Tuareg rebel movement. Some of its leaders are also in Algiers. So you can understand from, if you take if you put yourself in the Malian authorities' shoes, Algiers is cultivating sometimes with people you deem your adversaries, which is obviously problematic.
Yeah, Signe Marie Kold-Rathenkilde, we're speaking on a day when there's been a first thaw in what had been a low point in relations between Algiers and Paris with the liberation of the writer Boualem Sansal. What is Algeria's role when it comes to Mali?
A major neighboring country and, of course, a regional power. And we have also seen a deterioration of the relationship between the Malian government and Algeria lately, also over accusations of drones. So this relationship, as also explained by my colleague, is quite contested also, as there is also a tendency right now for the Malian regime to accusing its neighbors for supporting the jihadist insurrection. And we shouldn't forget that, as also this issue of the Tuareg question and the separatists is really a wound in the historical ties, both with France, and this is also something that also Malian influencers that is in support of the government has been quite vocal about. So there's continuously these conspiracy theories about France supporting jihadists, France supporting Tuaregs to keep a control of the Malian territory. And we can perhaps deny that and laugh about it, but this is something that is part of the historical reference points and something that is a very sticky narrative. And Algeria, as also said, has had an ambivalent role also in being part of surveying the Algiers peace agreement, which is now cancelled. The Algiers peace agreement is from 2015, which between these two separatists and not the jihadists was outside. But many people that is supporting and have a more sovereigntist position, who they think that the peace agreement is a violation of Malian sovereignty, basically. So Algeria has this difficult role in that.
All right, so burnt bridges with Paris, burnt bridges with Algiers. Moscow not always answering when you need it. So how about Turkey, which, as was mentioned earlier by Pierre-Élie, last week staged an arms expo in Bamako, much to the delight of the organizers' hosts.
We have learned to better defend our interests, to be less dependent on those who want to impose their will on us, and to work with those who are willing to respect us. This is what guides strategic cooperation between Mali and Turkey.
So, Djenabou Cissé, Turkey to the rescue for the junta?
To the rescue, I'm not sure, because I'm not sure that they would be willing as well to engage in a war in Mali. But they definitely are a new partner for the Malian regime. The Sahelian countries and even a lot of African countries have been diversifying their partnerships. And Turkey has been one of these new players. And Turkey has been actually be more and more appealing to African governments because of their multidimensional strategy with religious diplomacy, drone diplomacy, because they've been supplying a lot of Bayraktar drones, which have been very famous in Ukraine, for example, and also a lot of African governments actually like working with the Turks because of the absence of conditionality to the partnerships, no strings attached, relying to governance or human rights or so on. But at the same time, Turkey has been a much more discreet player than Russia, for example. They are not as vocal regarding disinformation. They are trying to retain a very positive image on the continent and towards their partners. So that's also why I don't think that Turkey would risk the reputational costs of being on the front line in such a sensitive conflict like the one happening right now in Mali. So I think it will be more keep supplying drones, keep the religious diplomacy, the humanitarian also aid is very important. Maybe logistical support, but not much more. No boots on the ground for sure.
All right, and so the consensus on the panel that there probably will not be a caliphate in Mali. But as was alluded to by several of our panelists, there is that perception and who's going to win the battle of ideas. And Kassim Kone is back with us, and this time by video link. Kassim, again, it's when you were back in Bamako, how are ordinary citizens getting their news? And you know, we talked earlier about conspiracy theories. Who do they believe?
Most Malians believe what the government says, but there are a lot of private radio stations, including even TV stations, religious or not. That's how they get their news. There are lots of private radio stations. And most Malians believe what the government says. What I said earlier on is what is still going on right now, because in these very hard times, you know, they seem to rally, you know, just a great deal of Malians seem to rally behind the military. That was my perception.
Okay.
And when it comes to caliphate, even if JNIM and EIGS, the Islamic State, even if they were to come together as a group, there is no hope that we can build a caliphate in Mali. As I told you, many Malians, I was born in Mali, I grew up in Mali, I went to the Quranic school, I was raised as a Muslim, but I've seen that the backlash has reached a point at which most people are actually willing to fight Islam if need be, to defend the country.
And right now, the situation as it is, we were earlier wondering if it's on par with when Bamako was under threat before the French intervened in January of 2013. You're saying that the population defends the junta in the future? What will it take for that relationship to sour?
I have had the feeling that a lot of young people, the youth in Mali, is willing to follow the path of Burkina Faso should the military ask for it. For example, the VDP in Burkina Faso, just civilians who can just be trained within a few weeks to help the army. Mali is at this point, has reached this point. The country, the determination of the young people in Mali has reached a point of actually joining the military one way or another, becoming a paramilitary to help the military. But in 2013, when there was this idea of threat of the jihadists to invade Bamako, it was a major bluff. Sévaré is about 575 kilometers from Bamako. But Bamako fall under JNIM or Islamic State is impossible. It's impossible. Logistically impossible. There are more than 2 million people in Bamako right now. And I'm sure 99% of them are against the Salafi movement, are against any kind of jihadi movement. Mali has always had a very tolerant Islam. So the kind of Islam that a caliphate is likely to bring is just unbearable. And I don't know, because I joined the debate late. I don't know if you already talked about the recent killing of the leader of JNIM in Mali. Abu Salam Umaru was killed just a few days ago. If not yesterday, the day before yesterday.
Right.
In Sumpi. So all of these, encourage Malians to follow the military.
Certainly, it's a fluid situation. We're going to have to leave it there, unfortunately. Kassim Koné, I want to thank you so much for joining us from Cortland, New York. I want to thank Signe Marie Kolda Radvinkilde for being with us. From Copenhagen, Djenabou Cissé, Pierre-Élie Durand-Chabot. Just a reminder for our viewers to join us this Thursday, 10th anniversary commemorations. Will be live throughout the day. We'll also be live for a special edition, 5 minutes to 6 p.m. Paris time, 2 hours to cover those ceremonies 10 years on. That's right here on France 24.